What if I told you one of rock's most successful bands auditioned their legendary drummer with his kit stuffed in trash cans? Or that their label demanded hits, so they gambled everything on a 20-minute track about rebellion. 24 gold and platinum albums without a single scandal. Then tragedy struck. Their drummer lost everything. Vanished for 5 years on a motorcycle into nowhere. A secret cancer battle. A final embrace that meant goodbye. Stick around. This is Rush's silent destiny. The story begins in Willowdale, a middle-class Toronto suburb where ambition mattered more than pedigree. August 1968. 3 young men, guitarist Alex Lifeson, drummer John Rutsey, and bassist Geddy Lee, formed Rush in the basement of Lifeson's home. They weren't chasing fame, they were chasing escape. This was Canada. The music industry infrastructure that existed in London or Los Angeles was non-existent here. No major labels, no powerful managers, no shortcuts. Just 3 kids from immigrant families who played louder, smarter, and harder than anyone around them. Their first professional gig happened 1 month later at the Cough Inn, a youth center in the basement of St. Theodore of Canterbury Anglican Church. The pay? 25 Canadian dollars, split 3 ways. This wasn't glamorous, this was survival. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. For the next 6 years, Rush lived on the Ontario bar circuit. Dive bars, youth centers, anyone who would book them. The grind was relentless, the money was negligible, but something was forming in those smoky rooms. A sound that rejected the standard blues rock formulas in favor of something more complex, more disciplined, more uncompromising. The lineup wasn't even stable. Lee was actually kicked out of the band. For a brief period, they renamed themselves Hadrian and brought in bassist Joe Perna and keyboardist Lindy Young. That experiment lasted exactly 1 disastrous performance. Rutsey invited Lee back, and Rush resumed their journey. Then came the break they didn't know they needed. March 1974. Their self-titled debut album dropped on their own Moon Records label. Recorded on a shoestring budget, it was straightforward hard rock. Nothing fancy, nothing experimental, just 3 guys playing with intensity and precision. 1 track changed everything. Working Man caught the attention of Donna Halper, a DJ at WMMS in Cleveland, Ohio. The song's heavy riff and lyrics about blue-collar drudgery resonated with Midwestern American audiences in a way no one anticipated. Imports surged. Mercury Records came calling with a contract. Finally, Rush had their ticket to the big leagues, but success demanded a price. An immediate U.S. tour was scheduled. John Rutsey, struggling with type 1 diabetes and preferring simpler rock music, couldn't handle the physical demands or the band's increasingly complex direction. The dream was expanding. Rutsey was walking away. On July 29, 1974, everything changed. Neil Peart arrived at the audition in a small car with his drums crammed into trash cans. To Lee and Lifeson, he looked like a bookish eccentric who didn't belong on a rock stage. Then, he sat down behind the kit. Peart didn't just play the existing material, he elevated it. His percussive sophistication far exceeded anything Rutsey had brought. More importantly, he brought something the band desperately needed, a literary mind. Fresh from a failed stint in London's music scene, Peart carried worldliness and intellectual depth that would transform Rush's identity. This was the Big Bang moment. Neil Peart's father had pushed him to audition as a last-ditch effort before returning to work at a tractor parts counter. That sliding doors moment changed rock history. For those who grew up valuing hard work and earned success, this origin story hits home. Rush didn't get handed anything. They ground it out, 1 basement show at a time, until the world had no choice but to notice. With Peart as the new drummer and primary lyricist, Rush entered the most dangerous phase of their career. They had a record deal, they had momentum, and they were about to throw it all away for creative freedom. The band rejected their label's demands for radio-friendly singles. Instead, they dove headfirst into progressive rock. Long songs, complex time signatures, science fiction themes, everything the industry didn't want. In 1975, they released Caress of Steel. The album featured The Necromancer, a 12-minute epic, and The Fountain of Lamneth, a 20-minute suite. Radio stations couldn't program it. Casual fans couldn't grasp it. Sales tanked. The subsequent tour became infamous as the Down the Tubes tour. Attendance plummeted. The band struggled to cover basic expenses. Alex Lifeson later admitted this was the only time in Rush's history he considered quitting. A notable moment from that era. Lifeson played the Caress of Steel album for Paul Stanley while touring with Kiss. Stanley listened with growing confusion, eventually nodding politely and quickly exiting the room. Even their peers couldn't comprehend what Rush was attempting. Their label and manager delivered an ultimatum: go commercial or get dropped. The pressure was suffocating. The smart move was obvious. Write shorter songs, chase the hits, stay alive in the industry. Rush chose the opposite. They retreated to the studio to record 2112. The title track consumed an entire side of the album, a 20-minute suite about individual resistance against a totalitarian regime. The story, influenced by Ayn Rand's writings, served as a direct metaphor for the band's own struggle against the music industry priests trying to control their output. This wasn't compromise. This was defiance. The gamble paid off beyond anyone's expectations. 2112 became a massive success, earning the band their first gold certification and providing the financial leverage to ignore label interference forever. The Starman logo, designed by Hugh Syme, became iconic, representing the abstract concept of man against the masses. What makes this moment so powerful is its universality. For the audience watching this video, those who came of age in an era of institutional distrust, the 2112 story is the ultimate validation. It proves that standing your ground against a faceless system isn't just noble. Sometimes it's the only path to victory. Rush had faced annihilation. They'd chosen artistic integrity over commercial survival, and they'd won. From 1977 through the late 1980s, Rush transformed from a cult progressive act into a global arena powerhouse. This era was defined by consistency, craftsmanship, and a work ethic that bordered on monastic devotion. After the breakthrough of 2112, the band pushed their technical limits even further with A Farewell to Kings in 1977 and Hemispheres in 1978. The latter album was particularly grueling. Recording at Rockfield Studios in Wales, they spent weeks perfecting complex time signatures and high-register vocals that would have broken lesser musicians. This period cemented their reputation as a musician's band. Each member was ranked among the best on their respective instruments, but mainstream press largely ignored them. Critics dismissed them as too technical, too cold, too cerebral. Radio programmers refused to play their longer tracks. None of it mattered. The fans understood. The connection between Rush and their overwhelmingly devoted audience grew stronger with each album. These weren't casual listeners. These were believers. In 1980, the band released Permanent Waves, balancing their progressive complexity with more accessible melodies. Then came 1981's Moving Pictures, the commercial and artistic peak. The album cover, designed by Hugh Syme, was a triple play on words: workers moving physical pictures, people being moved to tears by art, and a film crew making a moving picture on the back cover. This attention to detail extended to every aspect of their work. Tom Sawyer became their signature song. The track featured unique time signatures that felt natural and rhythmic rather than academic. It was progressive rock that made you move. It was complexity disguised as accessibility. Moving Pictures went quadruple platinum. Rush was selling out arenas worldwide. They'd become one of the biggest touring acts on the planet, all without a single celebrity scandal, drug arrest, or tabloid drama. By the mid-1980s, the band had accumulated an astounding achievement: 24 gold and platinum certifications. Not through hits, not through compromise, through sheer excellence and loyalty to their craft. During this era, Neil Peart's lyrics gave voice to suburban alienation and the pressure to conform. Songs like Subdivisions resonated with the latchkey kid generation. Young people returning to empty homes while both parents worked, feeling like outsiders in their own neighborhoods. For those devoted fans, Rush's peak represents something deeply personal. This was a band that proved you didn't need to play the game to win. You didn't need to chase trends or manufacture drama. Excellence, loyalty, and hard work were enough. Rush stood at the top of the mountain, and they'd climbed it their way. The fall of Rush wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a breakup. It was something far more relatable, the gradual physical erosion caused by the very perfectionism that made them great. By the late 1980s, the toll was showing. Neil Peart's athletic drumming style had led to chronic tendinitis. Every performance was a battle against joint pain and inflammation. Geddy Lee's iconic high-register vocals, the shrieking wails that defined Rush's early sound, were becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. Lee made a conscious decision to shift away from the high-pitched vocals of the 1970s toward a more natural tenor range. By the 1990s, the band began tuning their older songs down a whole step in concert to accommodate his changing voice. Alex Lifeson struggled with arthritis, which affected his hands and made reproducing his intricate solos a daily fight against pain. These weren't rock stars partying their bodies into ruin. These were craftsmen whose instruments were destroying them through sheer repetition and relentless standards. In the mid-1990s, something remarkable happened. Neil Peart, the professor, the greatest rock drummer of his generation, became a student again. Recognizing that his rigid, high-impact drumming style was destroying his joints, he took lessons from jazz coach Freddie Gruber to rebuild his entire technique from the ground up. This allowed Peart to play with more fluidity and less physical impact, extending his career by 2 decades. But it also highlighted a painful truth. Even the greatest have limits. For the avid fans watching, this chapter for Rush isn't just about a band. It's a mirror reflecting their own transitions from invincible youth to pragmatic veteran. The emotional weight comes from recognizing that even your heroes have to tune down to survive. The slow fall wasn't about relevance. Rush remained successful, touring arenas and releasing albums throughout the 1990s. The fall was about the human body's limitations, a reality every person eventually faces. But the real breaking point wasn't physical, it was personal, and it was devastating. Between August 1997 and June 1998, Neil Peart's world collapsed. His 19-year-old daughter, Selena, was killed in a car accident. Less than a year later, his wife, Jackie Taylor, died of cancer. Devastated and broken, Peart told his bandmates to consider him retired. Then he disappeared. For 5 years, Rush ceased to exist. Peart embarked on a solitary motorcycle journey across North and Central America, covering over 88,000 kilometers. He was searching for a reason to continue living, let alone drumming. During this time, the music industry assumed Rush was finished. Fans wondered if they'd ever hear from the band again. But Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson refused to replace their brother. They waited in what Lee later described as a bubble of grief, loyal to the man who had defined their sound for over 2 decades. This wasn't a hiatus. This was a vigil. Peart eventually documented his journey in the book Ghost Rider: Travels on the Healing Road. The title said everything. He was a ghost, riding through the wreckage of his former life, trying to find something worth returning to. In 2002, the ghost returned. The album Vapor Trails marked Rush's re-emergence, raw, heavy, and devoid of the polished synthesizers that had defined their 1980s work. The record reflected the emotional turbulence of the preceding years. The subsequent tour, particularly the performance documented in Rush in Rio, showcased a band that was no longer about technical precision alone. This was about survival. This was about joy. For the audience who have likely faced their own losses of parents, spouses, or children, Peart's story hits with profound force. The greatest drummer in the world found more solace in a motorcycle engine than in a drum kit for 5 long years. That's the power of grief. That's the cost of love. The final chapter of Rush is a lesson in how to walk away. In 2015, the band embarked on the R40 tour, a reverse chronological celebration of their 40-year career. The stage was designed to be dismantled as the night progressed, reflecting the band's history unfolding backward. Behind the scenes, the tour was a grueling struggle. Neil Peart suffered from chronic tendinitis and a foot infection that made walking, let alone drumming at his level, nearly impossible. But Peart was adamant. He would not become a shadow of his former self. Despite Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson's desire to continue, the band chose to end on their own terms. The final show took place at the Forum in Los Angeles on August 1st, 2015. At the end of the performance, Peart did something unprecedented. He came to the front of the stage and embraced his bandmates. For those who understood, it was a clear signal. The journey was over. No farewell album, no official announcement, just silence. For 3.5 years, Neil Peart fought a secret battle with aggressive brain cancer. Only a tiny circle of family and friends knew the truth. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson spent those years visiting him, maintaining his privacy, and deflecting fan questions about a reunion while knowing their friend was dying. On January 7, 2020, Neil Peart passed away. The world learned what Lee and Lifeson had been carrying in silence. The bubble of grief burst, and millions mourned the man who had given voice to their own struggles, their own alienations, their own hopes for something beyond the ordinary. Most bands end in lawsuits, overdoses, or farewell tours that never actually end. Rush ended with an embrace. For the audience who understood the value of walking away with dignity intact, this is the ultimate act of respect. Rush didn't chase one last paycheck. They didn't limp into irrelevance. They stopped when stopping was the only honorable choice. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was completion. The legacy of Rush isn't measured in sales alone. It's measured in influence, loyalty, and the blueprint they left for living a life of integrity. In 2013, Rush was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For decades, critics had dismissed them. For decades, the Hall had ignored them. But when their names were finally called, the crowd's reaction was one of the loudest in the Hall's history. A collective yell to everyone who'd underestimated three guys from Toronto. Alex Lifeson's acceptance speech consisted almost entirely of the word blah, repeated in increasingly dramatic fashion. It was a masterpiece of rock and roll irreverence, proving that even at the pinnacle of industry recognition, the band remained outsiders at heart. From Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins to Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters, Rush is cited as the reason a generation of kids picked up instruments. Their influence isn't just musical, it's moral. They showed that you could be a family man and a rock star simultaneously. You could achieve greatness without sacrificing your soul. Today, those 24 gold and platinum certifications stand as monuments, not to fame, not to fortune, but to the idea that excellence and authenticity can coexist, that compromise isn't mandatory, and that the highest form of success is staying true to yourself. The fall of Rush wasn't a failure, it was a completion, a perfect circle that ended exactly where it began, with three friends from Toronto who had something to prove. Rush proved that the greatest victories come from refusing to compromise. They built an empire without selling their souls, walked away before decline could tarnish their legacy, and left us with music that still matters decades later. Their story reminds us that success isn't measured in hits or headlines, but in integrity, loyalty, and the courage to stop when stopping is right. Was Rush the last band to walk away with their dignity intact? What's your memory of Rush? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories of rock's greatest journeys.